Welcome to my channel Sci-Fi Love Story. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. The fire began as a line of light no one understood. At first, it looked like part of the ceremony. Thin blue flames rose from the decorative towers around the Grand Plaza, curling into the sky like glowing ribbons. The crowd reacted with soft waves of color across their skin: admiration, approval, ritual joy. Then the towers started to melt. The metal bent like wax, stone cracked. The flames did not flicker like normal fire. They flowed smooth and hungry, spreading across surfaces that should not burn. And in less than 10 seconds, celebration became panic. Staff Sergeant Eli Carter of the United Earth Defense Forces had been stationed with the Orally Empire for 4 months, and he still felt like a tourist in dress uniform. He stood at the edge of the ceremonial plaza with 5 other human soldiers, boots together, hands behind his back, trying not to fidget. Remember, their liaison officer had told them, you are here as a symbol of unity. You are not security. Do not interfere unless directly ordered. Eli had been happy with that arrangement. The Orally Royal Guard handled security, and they were legends. Tall, silver-skinned beings in layered armor stood around the raised ceremonial platform in perfect formation. Their long crests shimmered with faint bioluminescent patterns, signs of focus and discipline. At the center of the platform stood Empress Celari, ruler of the Orally for nearly 2 centuries. She wore flowing robes of living silk that shifted color with every movement. Her voice carried across the plaza in musical tones as she recited the renewal oath, a ritual older than most human nations. Eli didn't understand the words, but he understood respect. So he stood still, quiet, professional, until the fire stopped looking ceremonial. The first scream came from the western side of the plaza. A civilian's robe caught fire where a falling ember touched it, except it wasn't an ember. It was liquid flame that clung and spread. More screams followed. The decorative arches along the plaza perimeter ignited all at once. Blue fire racing along them like fuel had been poured in advance. Eli's brain shifted gears instantly. Not ceremony. Attack. His comm implant crackled with overlapping orally voices. Their language flowed too fast for his translator to keep up. But panic didn't need translation. Thousands of civilians began rushing toward the exits. The once perfect rows dissolved into chaos. Hold position, his human lieutenant shouted. We are not. The rest of the order vanished in the roar of collapsing structures. One of the flaming towers fell inward, crashing into the plaza and sending a wave of heat across the crowd. Eli's eyes snapped to the platform. The Empress was still there. So were the royal guards. They moved instantly, forming a tight defensive circle around her. Shields unfolded from their armor. Their crests flared bright battle readiness. For a moment, Eli felt relief. Professionals had this. Then the fire changed. Instead of spreading randomly, it surged toward the platform supports. Blue flame crawled up the white pillars, eating through stone like acid. The ground beneath the guards began to glow. One guard stepped back as a section of flooring collapsed into fire. Another turned to help a falling civilian near the platform stairs. A third looked toward an escape path that was rapidly disappearing. Their formation loosened. Not from fear, from calculation. Eli knew that look, soldiers weighing survival against duty. The first guard broke formation when a burning support beam crashed where he had been standing. He retreated 3 steps, then 5. Then he turned and ran toward the crowd. The others lasted seconds longer. Each one forced back by falling debris, rising heat, spreading flame. One by one, the circle opened. And suddenly, Empress Celari stood alone on a platform that was starting to tilt. Eli felt something in his chest go cold. "Evac teams en route," his lieutenant shouted. "Humans fall back to the rally point." Eli didn't move. 40 meters. That was the distance between him and the platform. Too far to carry someone through that fire. Too hot for normal approach. No fire gear, no shield, no plan. He knew all of that. His training screamed it at him. But another thought pushed through, quiet and stubborn. She's alone. He watched her look around. Her skin had gone pale silver shock maybe. Her guards were gone. Her people were running. She didn't run. She just stood there, as if the ritual had never taught her how. Eli unclipped his rifle. Set it gently against the plaza wall. It would only slow him down. "Carter," his lieutenant yelled. "That's an order, fall back." Eli took his first step toward the fire. Heat hit him halfway there. Not warmth. Pressure. Like opening an oven the size of a building. His formal dress uniform was not made for this. The fabric tightened against his skin. Sweat flooded instantly. He kept walking. Each step closer made breathing harder. Smoke crawled into his throat even through his emergency filter. The screams behind him faded into a distant roar. All he could hear now was fire. The platform loomed above him, one side already collapsing. Flaming debris rained down in slow, deadly arcs. He reached the base where the stairs had already burned away. 10 meters up, the Empress saw him. Her eyes widened. Eli couldn't read orally expressions well, but he knew surprise. Maybe confusion. Maybe disbelief. He didn't wave. Didn't shout. Didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just turned his back to her and faced the fire. The worst of the flames were coming from the left, driven by strange chemical bursts that flared hotter than anything natural. So Eli moved left. He planted his boots on the cracked stone and squared his shoulders toward the advancing wall of blue. It made no sense. He couldn't stop fire with a body. But instinct told him the same thing it had told humans for thousands of years. Stand between danger and the person who cannot move. His sleeves began to smoke. Pain crawled across his exposed skin like insects. His eyes watered instantly, vision blurring. Every survival instinct he had begged him to run. But he locked his knees and stayed. He had been in firefights before, explosions, ambushes. This was different. There was no enemy to shoot. No cover. No victory. Just time. If he could take the heat for a few seconds. If he could block debris. If he could be one more obstacle between the fire and the Empress. Maybe that would be enough. Above him, Silari made a sound. A soft, layered tone that vibrated in the air. Not a word, something deeper. Eli didn't turn around. If he looked back, he might hesitate. He focused on breathing. In. Out. His vision tunneled. His uniform caught fire along one sleeve. He slapped at it blindly and smelled burning fabric and worse. Seconds stretched. Then through the roar, he heard a new sound. A deep thumping rhythm. Orally emergency craft. Foam projectors fired from hovering vehicles, releasing clouds of dense white suppressant that began smothering sections of blue flame. The fire didn't vanish, but it slowed. Eli stayed where he was, even as the heat dropped from unbearable to merely horrific. Even as his legs trembled. Even as black spots danced in his vision. Rescue teams extended grav lifts to the platform above. He heard movement behind him, voices, equipment. Still he didn't move. Not until someone touched his shoulder. A responder in sealed armor shouted something he couldn't understand. Only when hands physically pulled him backward did his legs finally give out. He dropped to his knees. Then everything went dark. The last thing Eli saw before losing consciousness was the Empress descending on a rescue field of light. Her eyes never left him. Her skin shimmered with colors he had never seen before. Not fear, not shock, something else, something ancient, and very, very serious. The fire was later called an assassination attempt. The day was recorded as a tragedy. But across the Orally Empire, one moment overshadowed all others. Not the flames, not the damage, not even the attack itself. It was the image captured by dozens of security drones. A lone human soldier, standing motionless, between an empress and a wall of fire, while the Imperial Guard retreated. And in the centuries-old memory of an alien civilization built on honor and duty, that image would change everything. Eli Carter woke up to the feeling of floating. Not falling, not lying down. Floating. His first thought was that he was still dreaming. His second thought was that dreams did not usually hurt this much. Pain came in slow waves, not sharp, not blinding, distant, controlled, like someone had turned the volume down but forgotten to turn it off completely. He opened his eyes. A soft silver glow filled the room. He was inside a transparent medical pod, suspended in a field of pale light. Strange symbols moved across the curved surface above him, and cool air flowed gently over his burned skin. He tried to lift his arm. It moved but slowly, like it belonged to someone else. "Easy," a voice said. The word came through his translator, but the tone was natural, not mechanical. Eli turned his head. Standing beside the pod was an orally medical specialist in a smooth white uniform. Her crest was dim blue, calm focus. "You are safe," she said. "Your injuries were severe but not beyond treatment." Eli swallowed. His throat felt like sandpaper. "The Empress," he croaked. The medic's crest flickered once, a soft pulse of gold. "She lives." Eli let his head sink back. Good. That meant it worked. He expected to wake up later to a quiet room, maybe a message from his commanding officer, maybe orders to prepare for transport back to Earth. Instead, when the medical pod finally opened hours later, he found an entire delegation waiting. The chamber beyond the recovery suite was wide and circular, its walls carved with flowing patterns of light. At least 20 orally stood there in formal attire, deep robes, crests decorated with metal rings and glowing threads. Military commanders, government ministers, nobility, and at the center of them all, Empress Silari. She looked different without the ceremonial robes. She wore a simpler garment now, but her presence filled the room more than any crown could have. Her silver skin shimmered faintly as Eli stepped out of the pod, supported by a hovering medical frame. Every eye in the chamber followed him. He suddenly felt like he had walked onto a stage without knowing the script. He straightened as much as his bandaged body would allow and gave a weak salute out of habit. "Staff Sergeant Eli Carter," he said hoarsely, "United Earth Defense Forces." A ripple passed through the orally crowd, color shifts, low tones. The Empress stepped forward. "Eli Carter of Earth," she said, her voice carrying that layered musical quality that always made his translator hesitate half a second. "You stood when my protectors did not." Eli shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, your guards were trying to survive the fire." She raised one hand gently. "This is not an accusation against them," she said. "This is recognition of you." He didn't like the sound of that. An older orally stepped forward beside the Empress. His crest was lined with thin metal bands, symbols of rank and history. "I am High Commander Terrell," he said. "I must explain what your actions have done." Eli blinked. I pulled someone out of danger, that's all. Several orally in the room made soft, disbelieving sounds. Commander Terrell continued. In orally history, there exists a warrior vow older than our empire, older than our unified worlds. It comes from a time when leaders fought beside their soldiers on open battlefields. Eli listened, confused but too tired to interrupt. It is called the Virokai, Terrell said carefully, as if the word itself carried weight. In your language, the closest meaning is the living shield bond. Eli frowned. Bond. If a warrior knowingly places themselves between certain death and a leader, Terrell said, without hope of survival, without command, without expectation of reward, a sacred protection bond is formed. Eli stared at him. That's just bravery, he said. The Empress shook her head slowly. No, she said softly. It is more than bravery. Bravery can retreat. Bravery can fail. Virokai is when retreat becomes impossible to the soul. The room went quiet. Eli felt like he was missing something important. I didn't know about any vow, he said. I just didn't want you to die alone up there. A low murmur swept through the chamber. Commander Terrell's crest glowed deep violet, something between awe and disbelief. That, he said, is exactly why the bond has formed. Eli laughed once, weak and confused. Okay, hold on. I'm a foreign soldier on exchange duty. I don't belong to your military structure. That is no longer true, Terrell said. The words landed like a dropped weight. Eli looked at the Empress. Ma'am. She met his gaze steadily. By the law of Virokai, you are now my Varish, she said. His translator paused, then supplied, bound protector. You stood as my shield when death was certain, she continued. That act cannot be undone. It places you under my direct protection and authority, above rank, above assignment. Eli's heart started beating faster. Respectfully, he said, I didn't sign up for that. I know, she said gently. That's my point. A few orally flinched at his raised voice, but the Empress did not. You did not act for reward, she said. You did not act from duty to our laws. You acted because you could not do otherwise. That purity is what binds the vow. Eli looked around the room at the watching officials. You're telling me I'm what, Royal Guard now? Terrell answered. You are something our guard failed to be. Over the next several days, as Eli recovered, the reality of the situation unfolded piece by piece. His human commanding officer arrived, looking more stunned than angry. Son, the colonel said quietly, we've reviewed the legal framework. Their ancient law overrides interspecies agreements. Technically, you now outrank their entire palace defense structure. Eli blinked. That's ridiculous. Yeah, the colonel agreed. But it's also legally binding under their civilization charter, and they're not budging. What about my service contract with Earth? The colonel hesitated. Earth's government has decided to honor the bond, he said. Diplomatically, this is big. You're the first human in history to be integrated into an alien sovereign protection role. Eli leaned back in his recovery chair. So I'm stuck. The colonel gave him a long look. You ran into a wall of alien fire to protect someone you barely knew, he said. I don't think stuck is the word. Outside the hospital wing, the Orally Empire was in turmoil. News of the ceremony spread across their worlds in hours. Not just the attack, but the image. A single human standing in the firelight, while Orally royal guards retreated. The guards had not been cowards. Analysis showed they followed survival logic under impossible conditions. But logic was not what their oldest laws honored. Military academies began emergency reviews. Philosophers debated on public networks. Was courage obedience? Or was courage refusal to abandon someone, even when survival demanded it? And why had the answer come from a species barely present on the galactic stage? Eli didn't feel like a symbol. He felt like a guy with healing burns and a job he didn't understand. One evening, Empress Silari visited him privately. No guards. No officials. She stood by the window of his recovery chamber, looking out over the glowing city. "You are troubled," she said. Eli gave a tired smile. "Ma'am, I just found out I accidentally joined an alien night order I didn't know existed." Her crest shimmered faintly, amusement. "Do you regret standing?" she asked. He thought about the fire, the heat, the certainty that he would die. He shook his head. "No," he said, "I regret not having a better way to help, but not standing." She nodded slowly. "That is why the bond chose you," she said, "not because you are fearless, but because you accept fear and still do not move." Eli looked at her. "I'm just stubborn," he said. "In orally history," she replied, "that is another word for unbreakable." At the far edge of the Empire, hidden in dark space, a damaged stealth vessel received news of the failed assassination. The alien faction responsible watched the footage of the plaza again and again. They had studied orally defenses. They had predicted guard response times. They had planned for every variable. Except one. A human who did not retreat when survival demanded it. Their leader issued a quiet order. "Next time," he said, "we remove the human first." Back on the capital world, Eli stood for the first time without medical support, looking at a new uniform displayed in his chamber. It was not human. Not fully orally either. It carried the colors of the Empress's house and the sigil of Virokai, a shield shape crossed by a vertical line. A symbol meaning, "Here stands the one who does not move." Eli sighed. "Guess I'd better get used to standing," he muttered. Across the palace, the Empress felt the distant echo of that moment through a bond older than empires. And for the first time since the fire, she allowed herself to feel something close to hope. Because the next attack would come. And this time, the galaxy would see what happened when a human was not just visiting, but staying. The second attack did not begin with fire. It began with silence. No alarms. No explosions. No warning lights flashing across the palace walls. Just a quiet shift in the air, a feeling Eli Carter had learned to trust long before he ever left Earth. Something was wrong. He stood outside the private strategy chamber of Empress Silari, hands clasped behind his back, wearing the dark silver uniform of the Varesh, the bound protector. Months had passed since the fire. His burns had healed into pale scars that ran along his hands and neck. The orally considered them marks of honor. Eli just thought they itched in cold weather. Two orally guards stood farther down the hall, new recruits, young, determined. They watched him with a mix of respect and nervous curiosity. To them, he wasn't just human. He was the human. The one from the fire. Eli never liked that part. He shifted his weight slightly. That was when the lights flickered. Just once. Soft enough that most people would ignore it. Eli didn't. His head tilted, he listened. No footsteps. No shouting. Just a faint metallic click behind the wall to his left. Too precise. Too controlled. He touched the calm bead in his ear. "Security, this is Carter, possible." The wall exploded inward. 3 armored figures burst through the breach in a storm of dust and shattered stone. Not orally. Tall, dark armor, visors glowing red. Weapons already firing. The 2 young guards down the hall went down instantly, stun bolts slamming them into the floor before they could raise shields. Eli moved before the second shot was fired. He dove sideways through the strategy chamber doorway and hit the emergency seal control. A hard light barrier snapped into place just as energy rounds slammed into it from the corridor. Inside the chamber, Empress Ilari turned from the holomap, eyes wide but steady. "Assassins," Eli said, "different method this time." The barrier shuddered as heavy impact struck it. It would not hold long. "Escape route?" he asked. "Sublevel transport," she replied instantly, moving to a concealed panel. Good, she was already thinking ahead. That was why he didn't have to. The barrier cracked. Eli drew his sidearm, not elegant orally tech, but a solid human kinetic pistol he trusted. The door exploded inward. The first attacker through the smoke took a round to the chest plate and staggered back. The second rolled low, firing. Eli felt the impact on his side like a hammer blow. Armor absorbed most of it, not all. He retreated step by step, placing himself between the attackers and the Empress as she opened the floor hatch to the escape lift. "Go," he shouted. "I will not leave my Varish," she said. "Respectfully, ma'am, that's not how this works." Another blast struck his shoulder, spinning him halfway around. He forced himself upright. Pain later. Standing now. The attackers advanced with terrifying discipline, no wasted motion, no fear. They had studied orally combat styles. They had not studied humans in close quarters. Eli kicked a heavy table into their path, buying 2 seconds, fired again. One enemy fell. The last attacker charged straight through the debris. Eli tackled him. They crashed into the wall in a mess of armor and fists. The alien was stronger, faster. But Eli didn't need to win. He just needed to delay. They slammed into the chamber door controls, sparks flying. The hard light barrier outside flickered and died. More footsteps approached in the corridor. Reinforcements or more enemies, he couldn't tell. The assassin raised a blade of vibrating energy. Eli grabbed the alien's weapon arm with both hands and forced it sideways, the blade slicing into the wall inches from his head. "Move," he shouted to the Empress. She hesitated 1 second too long. So he headbutted the assassin, stunning him, and threw his entire body weight into the alien, driving both of them through the open floor hatch. They fell. The emergency lift shaft was a vertical tunnel of rushing air and flashing lights. Eli slammed into the assassin mid-fall, twisting so his back took the impact against the grav field slowing grid. Pain exploded through him. The assassin hit below him, armor cracking. They rolled onto the sublevel platform in a tangle. Eli got to his feet first, barely. The alien rose too, damaged but not finished. Behind Eli, the lift doors above sealed. The Empress was descending through a separate secure tube. Good. That meant he only had one job left. The assassin lunged. Eli fired until his weapon clicked empty. The alien kept coming. So Eli met him head-on. No tactics, no elegance. Just fists, elbows, knees. They crashed into a storage rack, tools raining down. The assassin drove a blade into Eli's thigh. He roared but didn't fall. He grabbed the alien's helmet and slammed it against the metal wall again and again until the red visor cracked. Finally, the assassin went still. Eli staggered back, breathing hard, vision swimming. Alarms were finally screaming through the palace now. Security teams would be here in seconds. He tried to take a step toward the transport tunnel. His leg gave out. He hit the floor and laughed weakly. "Still standing," he muttered. When Orelli's security forces arrived, they found him sitting against the wall, one hand pressed against a bleeding leg, watching the corridor with stubborn focus. The Empress reached him moments later, escorted by elite responders. "You held," she said softly. He shrugged, They really should stop trying the direct approach. The attack failed. Again. But this time, the galaxy didn't just see a human stand and fire. They saw one hold a corridor alone against trained killers. Military analysts across dozens of species studied the footage. Not his aim, not his strength, but his refusal to disengage. Again and again, simulations showed the same conclusion. Humans did not calculate survival the same way other species did. They calculated something else, something harder to defeat. Months later, a new wing of the HFY War Academy opened. At its entrance stood a statue, not of a warrior charging, not of a hero raising a weapon, but of a human figure, scarred and tired, feet planted, body turned sideways, shielding someone behind him. At the base were carved simple words in HFY and human standard. Here stands the one who did not move. Years passed. Threats came and went. Empires rose and shifted. But wherever Empress Sailari traveled, one figure was always nearby. Not in front of her like a wall. Not behind her like a servant. Beside her. Watching. Ready. One evening, as they overlooked the lights of the capital world, she spoke quietly. Eli Carter of Earth, do you ever wish you had run that day in the fire? He thought about it. About the life he might have returned to. The quiet Earth skis. Normal duty. No statues, no bonds, no assassins. Then he shook his head. If I'd run, he said, I'd still be standing somewhere wishing I hadn't. Her crest shimmered gold. In all our long history, she said, we believed strength was power or skill or numbers. She looked at him. You taught us another kind. Eli gave a small smile. Yeah. Yes, she said, the strength to stay. They stood together in silence, watching ships cross the night sky. In a galaxy full of warriors, fleets, and weapons beyond counting. Sometimes the most powerful force of all was a single human being who decided not to move. The end.